Sam Seder, Emma Vigeland on the Majority Report. It is a pleasure to welcome to the program Lauren Windsor. She's the EP of the Undercurrent, and folks may know her as the most recent thing that made a big news was a recording that you made of Sam Alito's wife, Mrs. Alito. I can't remember her name. You probably do. Where she was talking about that flag across the bay and how she was going to put up a flag called Vergonia. Lauren Windsor, welcome to the program.
Thanks for having me, Sam. Thanks, Emma.
You really provided us with some incredible laughs, including you are our merch muse. We got a bunch of our viewers to put together a shirt with Vergonia on it. We ended up selling this, so we got to give you credit for this. This was hilarious to listen.
When do I get a picture?
You will be getting a T-shirt.
Yes, you've got to get one.
I need you both to autograph it, please.
She sounded She sounded so unhinged in that clip. Was that your reaction in person as it was happening? Did she have some liquid courage to share this stuff with you?
Sure, yes. I mean, this is not the end of her, so I imagine that she, had several glasses, but.
All right. Well, let's get into this. You got a story that just broke on Rolling Stone, and I give us a little backdrop to. I don't know if folks know about the ESG things like that kind of investing, the Net Zero Banking Alliance, Net Zero Asset Managers. What is that world?
Well, so ESG, it's been around for a long time. Really, since the early 2000s, it's probably better known as socially responsible investing. But it really gained traction during the Biden administration in letters to CEOs that Larry Fink would write. And he started writing these letters in 2012, but they became more and more sort of emphatic about sustainability and the role of climate change in investment making decisions. And so about 2020, 2021, he issued a letter where he said that.
And Larry Fink, we should say, is the CEO of BlackRock.
Yes. And he's the really the sort of boogeyman of this entire right-wing network that is funded and fueled by Leonard Leo, that's attacking the war on woke, this war on woke capitalism, that the theory being that Wall Street is, super leftist. But so Larry Fink's been the evangelizer of ESG, and because he's a Democrat and because he's talked about, because he also runs the largest asset manager in the country. It now has over $12 trillion in assets under management. He is their primary target to take out.
And we should say, I'm no fan of BlackRock, but I was always fascinated over the past year or so when folks like Charlie Kirk and Steve Bannon and many on the right started to demonize BlackRock particularly in the run up to the election. And I really couldn't figure out why. We should say Leonard Leo was the former, essentially the guy behind the Federalist Society. And when he left the Federalist Society, having stacked the judiciary with judges who, made rulings like the one yesterday about the Department of Education, he got $1 billion to essentially
1.6 billion.
1.6 billion. Where did that come from?
It came from an industrialist from Chicago named Barry Side. He's super reclusive, and not much was known about him prior to this coming out, that he was selling his company and just bequeathing all of the proceeds from the sale of it to Leonard Leo in a way that sheltered the sale from taxes.
Oh, that's convenient. And so do we have a notion of what Leonard Leo has been doing broadly, or is it just really glimpses?
Well, he talked about it. He came out. There was a piece in Axios that really announced, he's leaving the Federalist Society. Obviously he still has ties there, but to become the chairman of CRC Advisors, and also to run the Marble Freedom Trust. So the Marble Freedom Trust is the main vehicle through which they disperse all this money. CRC Advisors is a for-profit arm that provides services to all the entities in the orbit of the network. So they've actually been under investigation for self-enrichment because of all the money that's being paid to Leonard Leo and his firm on a for-profit basis.
It's basically like sort of a nice laundering apparatus, right? You donate this money to these not-for-profits. They pay your business to provide services. That money comes back to you, and it can just sort of it just keeps going around in a circle on some level.
Well, I understand the concept of, keeping money aligned within, your network, so that you're strengthening the people who are fighting for the issues that you believe in. But we're talking about self-enrichment on a scale of the DC Attorney General opened a probe into it, and they actually ostensibly moved the headquarters from DC to Texas to avoid that probe.
Wow.
Something that we broke in the story actually was that we have the documentation showing that the 85 fund, it was the 85 fund, not Marble Freedom Trust, but the 85 fund is one of the entities that disperses a lot of this money. So it's one of the conduits. It was the one that moved from DC to Texas.
All right. Well, so walk us through this now. You went to where is it that you went to get this tape?
Well, so I was at the Sea Island Resort where the conference was happening. I was not inside the conference because it was, an invite-only type of affair. It was not something you could just register and go. But I had a source who was there, and so I got audio from the source, and voila.
And what would tell us a little bit more about the Sea Island conference? Like, who's there?
I mean, it's a smaller affair, but very insular, very exclusive, very tied in, highest levels of Republican politics. So, you have ALEC, the CEO of ALEC, Lisa Nelson was there.
ALEC is the American Legislative Exchange Council, which set up model legislation where Republican state lawmakers go, and that's how we see from state to state similar laws being introduced into these state legislatures through ALEC. And ALEC was funded largely by the Koch network. So just, to keep people up to speed on this stuff.
Yeah. They've long been affiliated with the Kochs, but, they are very allied with Leonard Leo and get money from his entities as well, significant amounts of money from those entities. So ALEC, the State Financial Officers Foundation, which is like ALEC, but for treasurers. So when you're talking about ESG, they've been leading the charge in trying to implement ESG, like enforcement actions. So the theory being in Texas, for example, that, BlackRock, by using ESG, is discriminating against the energy industry. And so they passed a law called SB 13, which would allow Texas to block financial firms from the bond market if they found them to be discriminating against the energy industry. And so the comptroller, Glenn Hagar, can then say, oh, I find that you are discriminating against the fossil fuel industry, and so I will put you on a list that now means that, the state of Texas will not do business with you, and we can block you from the bond market.
I mean, this is nuts. The idea that you're going to inhibit, I guess, investing in any alternative energy sources and basically force people to support and to invest in oil companies. All right. So describe for us what this tape is.
Well, so this particular conversation, it was a fireside chat between, so the name of the conference was the Consumers Research Summit. And so Consumers Research is run by Lieutenant mentee of Leonard Leo's, Will Hild, who came out of the Federalist Society and that whole, group. He's talking to Brent Webster, who's the first assistant attorney general to Ken Paxton. And, they've just come out of, having a lot of wins against the banks. And I should say there's two separate sets here of financial firms. There's the banks and then the asset managers. So asset managers being BlackRock, Vanguard, State Street. These are the guys that are, running your retirement funds, running your retirement accounts. Anyway, they're like, okay, we've had all the success with getting them to drop out of the net zero alliances. And so the net zero alliances are basically global voluntary associations where people who are the financial firms that are members are saying, in our investment decisions, the companies that we invest in, we're going to be working towards getting everybody on board with reaching net zero carbon emissions by 2050, which, a lot of people, I would say, on the left would criticize these net zero alliances as being like greenwashing for corporate America. Like, hey, we're doing something without,
right,
really putting anything into motion that's going to structurally really have the power to mitigate climate change. So,
but the right clearly sees it as some type of threat.
Well, the right, I think they know better, but they want to, it's a cudgel to say, like, anybody who's taking any action whatsoever against climate change. We should also remember, it's not just climate change, it's DEI. So this is
right.
Anything that's a diversity initiative. Like, if you're seen to be inclusive of, trans people, then, you could be facing a pressure campaign from Consumers Research or any of the groups in this network. But anyway, so Webster, he says, he's like, you dropped this lawsuit against BlackRock, and then all these banks dropped out of the net zero alliances. Tell us about your role in that. And so he talks about it. And then Will isn't satisfied with that explanation. He's like, but, really, though, to the outside trained eye, it looked like these were separate things. But tell us, like, the backstory. And so Webster's like more than happy. Like, we're not recording this, right?
Yeah, let's play this clip.
Tell them about what was going on behind the scenes with Texas and the banks. You had a different conversation related to the intro stuff, but it also included some Texas laws, and you got some beautiful.
We're not recording this, right?
No.
Okay, well, I'll speak freely. Please don't quote me, because I'll tell the inside story on this. So when we approached this case, we decided we're going to bring a holistic problem-solving approach, which I like to bring to all of our teams. What are all the tools in our toolbox when tackling ESG? And we literally went through our list. We have our consumer laws, we have our antitrust laws, we have criminal laws, right? There may be some criminal implication here. We have some banking laws, and then we have this nice tool that the Texas legislature is giving us. Jason, I think you voted on these, and your wife may have Representative Isaac, who's here as well. Thank you guys, by the way, for what you've done for Texas. So they gave us this really nice tool that allows the Attorney General's office to block banks from the bond market. Okay? So the bond market in every state is massive, because bonds, that's how your ISDs, your counties, your cities, that's how they largely fund a lot of their building projects. And in Texas, we have a good bond rating, so banks want to invest billions of dollars in Texas. And so the legislature gave us this tool that said, if you're going to discriminate against the energy industry or against guns, we're going to kick you out of that bond market. Okay? Now, before I got there, for those who don't know, I'm kind of aggressive. I was a prosecutor for years. I fired a lot of people that were anti me. I paid a lot of prices for firing people, but I believe in staying on mission and focused on winning. And so I came in and I was like, well, I think we need to kick these people out of the bond market because they're discriminating against the oil industry and against guns. And you would believe how these government lawyers in my age are like, oh, the whole bond market will shut down. I mean, they will all leave and we'll have no one funding our bonds. And I was like, there is no way they're going to turn down all the money they're making on the bond market here.
All
it's
right,
like a controlled market.
let's stop it there. So just to catch up, this guy's coming in. He says, you know, he wants to brag about how what a brilliant guy he was and is, and he wants to also make sure that nobody's recording this. And so he talks about how the Texas legislature, which apparently his wife is part of, and some of his friends there, I mean, they're all there in the room, created this law that said, like you mentioned earlier, Lauren, that if investors discriminate against fossil fuels or guns, which is what they would also call the free market, right? Like you're supposed to be allowed to decide what you want to invest in. You can be kept from this multi-billion-dollar bond market in Texas. And when he brings this up, all the pinheads in his office were like, oh, you can't do that. It's going to crash the bond market. Let's jump ahead to where he tells the story of being in the office with Governor Paxton when who comes in here into the office that he is essentially strong-arming.
Well, it's not in the office. It's in the governor's mansion.
In the governor's mansion. Sorry. Yes.
He's having dinner with Governor Abbott and Governor Abbott's chief counsel, all these Wells Fargo executives and Ken Paxton. And so he tells the story of shaking down Wells Fargo.
All right, let's start it from a little bit later. Do you have that, Brian?
Yep.
Everyone provided a response to us. One of the banks, though, went to the governor's office, and that bank, Wells Fargo, operates in Texas. And look, they have a lot of employees in Texas. They have a lot of business in Texas. We like having their business. So they went to the governor. The governor doesn't know as much at this time about, and I'm not Governor Abbott, he's a great guy, but he didn't know much about our strategy with the bonds. So he sits down in his dining room in his house with me and Ken Paxton and his general counsel and all of Wells Fargo. And they do this big pitch of, hey, can you guys just let us get in the bond market again? We're so good for Texas. I let it play out, and I'm the smallest guy in the room. I mean, we got Ken Paxton, we got Greg Abbott. They're doing most of the talking, and Greg Abbott's like, maybe we can get him back in the bond market, Ken. And so I'm just waiting for my moment to jump in. And really appropriately jump in too, because I'm lower ranking. Well, hey, one of our this is one way to solve it, Governor. But another way to solve it, I think, could be that Wells Fargo could just leave the Net Zero Banking Alliance, and then we can reinstate the bond market. Well, at that point, Governor Abbott's like, well, maybe that is a solution. What do y'all think? So all of a sudden, Wells Fargo went from winning to massively losing. They all turned bright red, and they said, well, that seems to be an antitrust violation if we were to leave. And I go, that's not how that works. I go, you guys know how close, do you know how close you are to being sued right now for this being an antitrust violation? Which they weren't ready for that comment to be made, because they thought this was like just a GR meeting. And so they're still turning red, and then we need to talk to our lawyers about this. And I go, great, just vote the idea. Governor was like, yeah, let's talk about this more. So great conversation, love the plot twist. Fast forward, we sue BlackRock. And I've been waiting for this day. I have the phone number for the guy from Wells Fargo. I call him up. I go, hey, can you start filing? He goes, no. And I go, hey, pull it up. And I send him the link. And I go, you need to read this, because you guys might be next. They left a week later. They left the Net Zero Banking Alliance, and then all the banks followed. So they're all deathly afraid of being sued, because my underlying theory stands. None of them want to be subject to depositions. None of them want to be subject to discovery. So you're going to see interesting trends on these things. And I would encourage you guys, anybody who has power over state enforcers or influence over state subpoena power, they do not want to respond to your subpoenas. They know that what's in there is not good for them. So just keep that in mind. If you have any influence over that, states should be ramping up right now their enforcement actions, both at the legislative level and also at the executive level.
Okay. I mean, there it is. he outlines using lawsuits and essentially blackmail to get these people to leave an alliance to invest in alternative energy sources, or just investment groups that won't invest in fossil fuels, and encourages everybody in the room, who are all similarly situated in different states around the country, to essentially do the same. I mean, you talk about weaponizing government. I mean, this is pretty stunning.
I should note one thing that we wanted to include in the story, but it became something that read a bit confusing. But just so your readers know, or readers, your audience, your listeners know, when you said his wife was involved with it, so Webster was thanking a Texas state representative named Jason Isaac. Jason Isaac's wife is currently a state representative. Jason was working for the Texas Public Policy Foundation and introduced the law, SB 13, that allowed Texas to be able to force these financial institutions out of the bond market. And, Jason tells a story in a different panel where he talks about how he passed that law in the first place. And what he says is, I was talking with Dan Patrick's office, and who's a lieutenant governor. I was talking to their staffers, and we kept going back and forth on, boycott fossil fuel companies or boycott oil and gas. And to me, when I first heard it, I'm like, why wouldn't they be on the same page? There's actually a reason that there would be a fight over that language. But anyway, Jason Isaac prevailed for it to say fossil fuels because it was a bit of subterfuge with the staffers. But he prevails on the language, and he says, what they didn't know that I knew, it's by saying fossil fuels to include coal, it meant that we could capture more banks on the list because they had specific goals against the coal industry. So
even if it wasn't coal industry in Texas, it was coal industry nationwide.
Anywhere, exactly. So, for them to come out and say that we're passing these laws because we're protecting our state industries is total BS. Because he's saying right there, we don't really. The only reason I included coal in the law in the first place was because I knew I could use it to go after banks. And I talked to a reporter in Texas, Chris Tomlinson for the Chronicle, who reports extensively on climate and business. And he was like, well, the reason that Patrick wouldn't be on the same page as Isaac is because he's a big supporter of the natural gas industry. And he personally is responsible for getting billions of dollars of government funding in line for new natural gas plants. And he was like, why would Dan Patrick want to give coal a foothold in the industry in Texas when it's one of the most competitive energy markets in the country? And right now, there are natural gas companies that are pulling out of this fund because the price of natural gas is not high enough to warrant building the plants. So they're actually actively trying to, the government, or I should say, people who are allies of natural gas, trying to suppress coal in the market in Texas to make natural gas more expensive so that it makes these investments feasible.
So tell me what the fallout do you anticipate? I mean, this is like one of those things where we're just sort of on the sidelines watching these two entities fight on some level. I don't know how much people are at least on the right are going to get exercised about the idea of government being weaponized to help fossil fuels and the gun industry. But what happens now? Would Larry Fink, the CEO of BlackRock, or would the people at Wells Fargo, are they going to have stockholder issues? What happens next?
Well, I mean, I think that they have stockholder issues either way. So basically, the folks in the Leonard Leo network group are responding to the trend on the left of waging proxy battles. So they're getting more and more involved in waging these proxy battles to counter the left's influence. But they're in all of their rhetoric, like calling big banks like leftist, like lumping them in with the left in a way that, to me, as someone who came out of like Occupy Wall Street, is just mind-boggling that these people who fought against Dodd-Frank are now saying that like Larry Fink is a Marxist. Like it's insane.
Well, they're like just weaponizing the kind of hatred of the base towards whether it be minorities or leftists, what have you, in order to circle the wagons for the people that fund their campaigns. Like when they talk about how this is discriminating against the corporate persons, the oil and gas industry, what they're actually doing is discriminating against sustainable energy by trying to fortify these companies that are failing.
Well, if it were actually free market, like I could understand passing the law to protect your own industries in the state, right? Like, if Texas, if all the elected leaders are like, we're going to protect the oil and gas industry because it's vital to our economy from a free market basis, BlackRock and all these banks have every right to make investment decisions how they see fit. Texas has that right too. I wouldn't have a problem. What I have a problem with is they don't stop there. It never stops at we're just going to make the decision not to do business with you. Now we are going to use different tools in order to just beat you into submission, which is what Webster is describing here, because it wasn't good enough to just like block them from the bond market. Then it's, hey, now we're also going to drop these antitrust lawsuits against you, which is currently something that BlackRock is going through, and they're not going to drop that suit. This is something that they are intent on getting a scalp.
And so how does like some of the other bankers react to this? I mean, are they aware of how concerted this effort is, or is this going to be a revelation to people who are in that world? Or are they going to have a better sense of like exactly how coordinated all of this is?
Definitely. They've been under attack for several years now, so I'm sure they know that it's very well funded, and that it's the movement that the network that Leonard has built, that the conservative movement has built around this campaign, is substantial. I don't know that they know that it's as substantial as it is. And I do think it will be illuminating for people how devoted they are in the ways that they talk about really destroying any entity that has any inclination whatsoever that they describe as leftist. They're all about defunding the left and anything that has any association with it.
Lastly, let me ask you this. The talk that we did hear from right-wing media personalities in demonizing BlackRock, how much do you think that was core? I mean, you run in these circles many times unbeknownst to them. How much do you think that was, how incentivized were they to get into that fight, by these networks?
Well, I mean, I've been working on, like some relationship maps that I think will be more illuminating to this, but to your point, but these groups are all funded in some way, like they're part of this ecosystem. And so, Chris Rufo and Manhattan Institute and Heritage Action and, the various spokespeople associated, like Robbie Starbuck, who talks about this a lot. Consumers Research with Will Hild and going out and talking about Larry Fink. You know, they have an entire website is like, who is Larry Fink? Different people from different organizations. I mean, all the funding is like slushing around to all the different parts of the ecosystem.
It's fascinating. Folks can go to rollingstone.com. We're going to put up a link to Rolling Stone, the piece in Rolling Stone, and of course to the Undercurrent. Lauren Windsor, some great reporting on something that I think has really been obviously extremely active on the right. And I don't know that people outside of those circles had been aware of what was going on. Really appreciate you coming on and telling us about it.
Thanks, Sam.
Hey, folks, don't forget to hit the subscribe button and check out our daily show. We do it every day at 12 p.m. Eastern for about 2.5 hours. We even take phone calls. You should check that out.